And for good, but a report out tonight says there are major problems with the ballot initiatives and the legislative bills. Well, News Center 4's Mark Jones says joining the critics are the criminals.
An anonymous prisoner who admits to killing 5 people told News Center 4 a strike 3-year outlaw means if he commits another violent crime, with nothing to lose, he won't leave any witnesses, and he'll shoot to kill any officer who tries to arrest you. The Strike 3-Year Out initiative has been hotly debated at the Martinez jail this week. Don Ford, convicted of manslaughter and awaiting trial for parole violation and alleged armed robbery, says there is confusion about such a law.
There's a lot of people in there that don't rape women, that don't get out and molest kids. And you got career criminals that get out, they do burglaries and stuff like that, where there is no violence involved.
In the first written analysis by a district attorney's office, the Contra Costa County DA says the voter initiative has flaws which could cause years of lawsuits. For instance, under the initiative, juvenile criminal records would be included for violent histories, but juveniles are sentenced without benefit of a jury.
If we're going to put people in prison for 25 years to life based in part upon juvenile crimes, that the California Supreme Court is going to say you have to offer them a jury trial.
There aren't enough judges or courtrooms now for adults headed to prison. Other problems. Under the initiative, out-of-state felony convictions would not be considered. Death row cases could be jeopardized by defense attorneys.
Saying you can't charge my guy with a death penalty because the initiative, which has just passed, says it's the exclusive remedy.
Yancey says the problems can easily be cleared up with a little fine-tuning in Sacramento.
I personally will support and vote for the initiative if the legislature doesn't get off its duff and give us a good, comprehensive habitual offender statute. Because flawed as it is, it's far better than what we have now.
And prisoners are paying attention.
You know, a lot of them are talking about going out of state, going to another state when they get out.
In Martinez, Mark Jones, News Center 4.
Now, you may not know this, but there are half a...
Should violent criminals ever be paroled? NBC's Jim Cummins looks at an idea with support at the grassroots and at the White House. Locking up repeat offenders for good. They call this one 3 strikes and you're out.
Here's the problem. According to one study, 2/3 of the violent crimes in this country are committed by only 7% of the criminals. They are called repeat violent offenders, such as 47-year-old Kenneth McDuff. McDuff was first convicted of murdering 3 teenagers in Texas back in 1968. He was paroled in 1989 and went on a spree of kidnapping, rape, and murder that has resulted in 1 murder conviction. He's standing trial on a 2nd murder charge. One prosecutor describes McDuff as everybody's nightmare. A sister of one of McDuff's suspected victims said what everybody is thinking.
I mean, all this money being spent when we could have just kept him in prison once and been done with it.
At least McDuff was locked up for more than 20 years. A 1992 survey by the National Center for Policy Analysis in Dallas found the average murderer could expect to spend 1.8 years in jail. The average rapist, 60 days.
The bottom line is this is a scary place to live. It's that simple.
Mike Reynolds is leading a petition drive in California for 3 strikes and you're out, a referendum that would require judges to send 3-time violent offenders to prison for 25 years to life with no chance of parole.
19 months ago, I stood alongside a little girl that had a .357 Magnum bullet in the middle of her brain.
That girl was Reynolds' daughter, Kimber, shot to death during a robbery by 2 men. One of them was killed in a shootout with police. The other, a drug user with a long criminal history, pleaded guilty to armed robbery and accessory to murder and was given a 9-year prison sentence. Under current law, he'll probably serve half that time.
The need to get people that we have identified as being violent, serious threats to our society off the streets has never been greater.
Reynolds' initiative was revitalized by the abduction and murder of 12-year-old Polly Klaas by a man police say was previously convicted of 2 other brutal kidnappings. Support for 3 strikes and you're out is spreading like wildfire. President Clinton endorsed it in his State of the Union speech. Voters in Washington state have enacted it into law. 30 other states are considering it. But Texas is trying something else, charging repeat violent offenders with a federal crime because federal law mandates that convicts serve about 90% of the length of their prison sentence. Benny Laverne Collins is a prime example of how this program works. Collins served 12 years in Texas prisons for a string of rapes and robberies. But after an early release, he went on a violent robbery spree in Dallas and then fled to California, where he was convicted of 11 robberies and is expected to serve 9 years in prison. When he's released, Collins will serve time for his Texas crimes, but not in state prison. Collins was tried in federal court and convicted of violating a federal law called the Hobbs Act, using a gun to interfere with interstate commerce. His sentence, 45 years. His first chance for release, the year 2021.
I think that it's unfair for the federal government or the state government to be able to pick and choose what cases that they prosecute under the Hobbs Act. Yeah, I think that's unfair.
At some point, society is going to draw a line in the sand and say to people, you know, we've given you so many chances or so many strikes, and we just don't think you're going to change at that point.
Should repeat violent offenders, convicted murderers and rapists ever be paroled? States are starting to say no, enacting laws like 3 strikes and you're out and prosecuting repeat offenders in federal court. Will it work to stop the violence? We don't know the answer to that yet. But what is clear, across the country, many Americans want to find out, and want to find out now. Jim Cummins, NBC News, Dallas.
Drugs are at the heart of the epidemic of violent crime in this country, and that kind of crime is the hot political button of the season. But what to do about it? How to pay? President Clinton and the nation's governors met on those issues today, and we have more tonight from NBC's Andrea Mitchell.
Washington. With Americans on edge about crime, politicians want to show they're doing something about it.
We know that a small number of people commit a significant number of the truly violent crimes and are highly likely to be repeat offenders.
Mr. Clinton asked the nation's governors today to lobby for a new crime bill that would lock up repeat offenders for life, the 3 strikes and you're out bill. Many of them told him that the proposed federal law might do more harm than good.
We have to fight crime in the streets. They can't do it in the halls of Congress. What the governor's concern is that the states end up getting their hands tied.
3 strikes and you're out at the federal level doesn't mean much, does it? Because there are not that many federal crimes in which you can put somebody in prison for life.
Under the proposed law, a repeat offender would be locked up for life only if his 3rd violent crime took place on federal property.
A youthful drug addict who had 2 early drug convictions, 15 years later stealing a radio from a park ranger car on federal property, would be eligible for life without parole.
3 strikes and you're out would affect only a few hundred criminals a year and not necessarily the most violent. Attorney General Reno has expressed doubts about the provision. Senate Judiciary Chairman Joe Biden called it wacko. And no one has figured out how to pay for all this law and order.
If we say we're going to get tough in terms of both prevention and punishment, and yet there's no money there, so there are no real cops on the beat, or no new jail cells to house the violent, then the public is going to feel fooled and eventually angered.
White House officials have told NBC News that they know the proposal won't work as advertised. But right now, talking tough about crime is good politics. Andrea Mitchell, NBC News at the White House.